Hello everyone and welcome to Statistics. This week we're going to focus on getting you oriented to the course in terms of the technology, the goals, and also some of the perhaps unique ways you want to approach studying and learning in this course, both in terms of working with statistics and also kind of my own personal preferences as an instructor. So this first part we have here is looking at optimal learning strategies. Kind of give you an idea of why we're going to study the way we do for this course, it's important to first understand what the course content is going to be, because what the course is about can sometimes drive the best ways to study for the course. So, in this particular course, we have several different things that we'll be working with. The first one is new terminology, including specialized symbols. So, not only are we going to have terminology such as probability theory or t-distributions, but we're also going to be having unique symbols that we need to be using. Statistics is a kind of specialized language, and so just like any other language, you're going to need to learn what the symbols stand for so that you can understand them when you see them. They're a type of shorthand that we use a lot, and I'm going to use them throughout the PowerPoints and the problems, so you need to get familiar with. Secondly, statistical formulas. This one we've got here is a pretty easy one we're going to work with for the first exam. That is your standard deviation for a sample. Notice that's the small s. Notice how I can tell that from the small s. That's an example again of the special language that we use. We've got probability theory. We're going to have about a month that we're going to focus on probability theory exclusively, and then we're going to move on to applying it to other problems. So here's a figure that we're going to use with probability theory. An important rule of probability theory is that all possible events sum to the total of 1. So we'll be looking at that particular aspect of probability theory and how that helps us do certain calculations. We're going to be looking at hypothesis testing. We're going to do this a lot. So for example, in this class, by the time we're done, you'll be able to easily answer this type of question here. This is an example of an independent t-test. We're looking at a proctored and a non-proctored test for an online course. We've got a set number of students. We've been given a significance level, which will begin to understand how important that is. And we're testing the claim that students taking non-proctored tests get higher scores than those taking proctored tests. So you'll learn how to set this up from the very beginning with this paragraph, going through and deciding on the hypotheses, doing the testing, and the interpretation. Lastly, we're going to be using a lot of different theoretical distributions. Here's a basic example of a z-distribution that we'll be working with, but we'll also be using t-distributions, chi-square, so we've got a lot of theoretical distributions to work with and get familiar with. Each has their own parameters and their own rules. So this is a lot of information to be looking at, and it's a lot to learn in one semester successfully, and not only now, but keep in mind you're going to be needing this for future courses and your career. So, to help you get an anchor on all of this information, I've built this course around some optimal learning strategies for statistics. These are ones that I used myself when I was an undergraduate or grad school, or that I discovered later on and wish I'd have known then. So let's take a look at what they are and how you can apply them. So, our optimal learning strategies for the course. Repeated exposure, experiential learning, i.e. learning by doing, learning through failure, and learning with others. These are the 4 core pieces for optimal learning strategies that this course is structured around. Repeated exposure. Research shows the repeated exposure to information helps a person retain it. So especially true for terminology and symbols. So for each of the sections you're going to notice you're going to be reading the assigned sections. That's essential before you move on to the next part. Then you need to be taking the warm-up quiz, which is basically a type of reading comprehension and very short application. Then you're going to be watching the narrated lectures. A word about those narrated lectures. These are not canned lectures. These are my custom lectures that I've built. They come exactly from what I taught in the classroom, although modified a little bit because we can't do the work on the whiteboard in the same way. But I've worked a way around that for the PowerPoints as well. Then you're going to want to work through the homework problems where you're going to be applying all of this information, and then you're going to take the exam readiness assessment. That's going to give you an idea of how well you understand the material. All of this is repeated exposure to information with the goal that by the time you've followed all 5 of these steps, you will indeed understand the information and be able to recall it well and thus do really well on the exam. The next type of optimal learning strategy we have is what we call experiential learning. So, like a lot of other things, stats is something you learn by doing. You can read a book about how to play card games, but it's never going to be enough. You're going to have to play the card games yourself several times to be able to really get good at it. Same thing for sports, or indeed lots of engineering stuff. I mean, you can read a book about doing a car engine, but that's very different than being able to get in there and actually take it apart yourself repeatedly and put it back together. Statistics works exactly the same way. You're going to need to learn it by doing the problems over and over. Now, to help you get started with this week we have what I call a learning myths quiz, which is a little quick tool that's going to go through and look at some of the myths that we sometimes carry about learning that actually can undercut our ability. And you're going to have a discussion forum associated with that. You're going to have 3 tries on the warm-up quizzes. So the warm-up quizzes, you have 3 tries. These are places for you to make mistakes, get something wrong, come back and fix it again. 3, you're going to work through the problems, the narrated lectures, and check your work. Again, these narrated lectures are my custom pieces that I built. They are not a canned video. In them, I work through the specific types of problems that we do in the class, which are connected with the ones you're going to do for your homeworks and your exams. In the classroom, as we work through a problem, I stop, have everybody do their work, and then we check it together. This allows each student, as we're going through it, be able to identify right then, are they following what's going on, or are they already getting stuck somewhere? If you're getting stuck and you don't understand something, do not keep going. It will not get better. It will not get clearer later on. Stop, back up, watch the video again. If you're really confused, reach out to me via email and I'll be glad to help you out. But work through the problems in the narrated lecture. Stop it. When I tell you to in the videos, write down the work and then check your answer. You're not going to feel as good about it because you're going to be anxious about getting it wrong. It's nicer and easier to watch the videos go all the way through, but your comprehension and learning is not as good. And in fact, we're going to look at that in just a few minutes with the learning through failure that we're coming at next. 4th, for experiential learning, you've got your homework problems that you want to be working on, and you want to pay attention to how effortful learning helps you recall information later. So let's take a quick look over here and segue over for that just a little bit more. Effortful learning. Learning that feels difficult embeds the knowledge in our memory better, while learning that feels pretty easily actually quickly disappears. Unfortunately, if you're learning through something that feels pretty easy, you're often simply left with the sense that you have knowing the thing but not being able to actually use the knowledge. That is not useful. So what we need to do is we need to have effortful learning, and that's where the homework problems come in. So, homework problems are an essential component of applying and encoding what you've learned in the lecture. They're a valuable learning experience. Students that do well in the class do not rush through the homework problems. They focus on understanding and remembering each necessary piece of information and how to put them together. The homework problems, quite honestly, are one of the core locations of learning in this class, so rush through them. When you're trying to retrieve an idea from your memory, whether you're using it from a homework from the lecture, or we'll see again looking at the exam readiness assessments, and you're trying to apply a particular approach to a problem, you're actually strengthening the associated neural pathways. These neural pathways are memory. So by doing the thing, you are making the memory. If you're skipping these steps and you're not doing the work, you're not going to have a strong memory. All right, back to learning strategies. Okay, now the next thing we have here is learning through failure. Not most people's favorite part, and honestly, not always my favorite part. However, absolutely essential, not only for statistics, but alas, even for life. So, when we're thinking about failure, we have this image over here. It's kind of the way you want to admit. You try something, it doesn't work. You try it again. You go back and you try something else. However, the piece they left out of that little figure is you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. You're going to need to rethink your steps. So, you're going to need to stop, rethink it, check your notes, improve your notes, get some assistance, then try again with a better and improved understanding. This is the key for succeeding in this class and understanding the material. So, to help you kind of learn to work through with failure, we've got a learning through failure activity and discussion form that you're going to do this week to kind of get you familiar and thinking about how failure can actually be good. All right, it's not a problem in this class. We're going to fail a lot. It's okay. The question is the location of the failure and how you respond to it. All right, again, working through your problems in the narrative lecture and checking your work is very important. Okay, if you're not doing that, you're not getting the very first hands-on exposure to the problems. your homework problems. You have 3 tries for your homework. You also can check your work step by step as you go through it. So as we get into some of the longer problems, you're going to be able to check each step as you go. I've selected homework problems that are set up that way rather than an all or nothing. And lastly, you're able to get several different forms of assistance when you're working on the homework problems and things are not going well for you. So let's take a quick look at that. All right, so getting assistance with the homework. Assistance options are on the right hand side of every homework problem, and here you can see the little image over here to the right. If you click on that where it says question help, it gives you a drop down menu of various different options that you can use for getting further assistance. You're going to want to watch the course technology lecture, which is one of the other ones for this week, in order to make sure that you know how to optimally use these various assistance options. All right. Also, keep in mind you can work through the problem with a classmate. Okay, so if you look at this learning with others in this lecture, you're going to see that I don't have a problem with you getting assistance with the homework because that's where you're learning. Just be sure to follow the policies regarding what is and is not allowed. All right, and also when we're looking at this, be aware of the fact that we're going to have a stats tutor now available on campus. I'll be introducing y'all to him in just a little bit later, so probably in a couple of weeks. All right, now one of the important things when you're looking at the question help, it includes an option that sends an email to me with a direct link to the specific problem that you're struggling with. Each of these problems that we're going to be using on my math lab is the same type of problem but with unique numbers. This is one of the ways that I can allow you all to work together and work online and not have to be concerned about plagiarism and cheating because you're each getting your own unique problem. That means, however, that if you're having stuck on the homework and you tell me you're stuck on problem number 3, that doesn't help me very much because I don't have your specific numbers or examples to look at. Good news is, under this question help, we have an option, ask my instructor, that will send me an email link specifically to your problem, and you can type right into there what you're struggling with so that I can get in touch with you about it. 9 times out of 10, when students email me like this with a problem, I'm usually able to give you an answer and get you unstuck within an hour. All right, now you need to notice how effortful learning that we looked at with doing the homeworks and learning through failure really overlap here. The combined power of them is where the learning for statistics and indeed almost any course takes place. However, sometimes it feels like your mental gears are just grinding and you're not making any progress at all. This may be a sign that you need to take a quick break. Go for a walk, or you can try out one of the quick relaxation games in the student break room. So if you go and you look on the modules, you're going to see that there's a link that says resources to be used throughout the course. And one of those is a student break room that's got various different relaxation activities on it, online coloring books, and a couple of different really quick video games just to kind of step back from the statistics problem you're working with, get your brain engaged, doing something different, kind of give it a break and give it some relaxation. And then once you've done that, sometimes it helps just to do that and then come back and look at the problem again when you're not quite so stressed about it. All right, back to more learning strategies. Okay, finally looking at the learning through failure, the other part we have with this is our exam readiness assessment. The exam readiness assessment is a self-test of your knowledge. You also have the option to redo the problems to prepare for the exam. So, keeping in mind, when we're looking at the exam readiness assessment, one of the things to keep in mind is what we call the fluency effect. Now, fluency is the feeling that because we know something now, we'll know it just as much of it and will be just as accessible in an hour, a day, or a week. This means when we're reviewing over material and we're actually looking at the answers, it triggers the fluency effect. This can cause us to overestimate our likelihood of recalling the information later. You probably have had this happen to you before when you've prepped for an exam, you felt you really knew it, you went in and it did not go well and you're like, oh my god, I don't know why I could not remember that information. I felt like I knew it so well. You might have actually had the fluency effect because you were looking at the answers with the work. The solution for this problem is to not be looking at answers while you're doing the work, but to actually take a quiz, a self-type of quiz that is close as possible to what the exam is actually going to be. And that's what the exam readiness assessments are built for. Okay, requires you to work brand new problems and you're going to be taking them under the same conditions as the upcoming exam. Okay, so on the exams, you only get one try. You don't have three tries to work it through. You're not going to have any assistant tools. You're going to have to complete it all on your own according to class policy, so you can't get help from somebody else, and you can't check your work as you progress. So a lot of students, when doing the homework problems, I've noticed over the semesters, overestimate their ability to be able to solve those same types of problems on the first exam. So the exam readiness assessment kind of helps you break out of that fluency effect. Okay, it's going to provide you with an accurate assessment of how you would currently perform on that section on the upcoming exam, and you can then use it to target your study efforts to prepare for the upcoming exam. Remember, you learn through failure. So if the exam readiness assessment didn't work for you, let's say you got a 53, okay, that's not great, but the exam readiness assessment is actually only worth 10% of your grade all total together. Your exams are worth 55% of your grade. So you're going to want to know on the exam readiness assessment that something's not going well. So you can go back through the videos again, get some more assistance, maybe reach out and meet with me for a study session, get in touch with the stats tutor on campus. Okay, you want to make sure that you watch the course technology lecture for how to access the exam readiness assessment problems, because you can use these also as an excellent exam prep activity. So one of my recommendations when people go, how can I optimally prepare for the exam? I suggest you go back through, look at the exam readiness assessments and review them with new problems so that you can go through and try it again. If you're not getting it correct in the exam readiness assessment setup, you're not going to get it right on the exam. Okay, now the other thing with the exam readiness assessment that's really good is you don't have to wait till the week before the exam to find out you don't understand something. So if we're closing up a section, say we're finishing up section 4 on probability theory, you have your exam readiness assessment, it does not go well, you're not happy with your score there, that tells you that you need to reach out to me right away. We need to set up some appointments, we need to meet with you and get working and see what we can do to address your problems. A lot of times when I meet with students, I can figure out what kind of places you're struggling over by the kinds of mistakes you make, and we can get you back on track, quite possibly get you set up with a system so you can work one-on-one with a stats tutor a little bit to help get you back on track. Okay, back to learning strategies again. Okay, our last optimal learning strategy here is learning with others. This is super important. Okay, we build this through having discussion forums where you're going to be talking with your fellow classmates, either within the class as a whole or sometimes in smaller group discussions. Keep in mind, I encourage you all to help each other with the lectures and understanding the information, helping each other with the homework as long as you're following class policies, and importantly, encouragement and support. So, remember when we're learning with others, I have a couple of class policies that you need to follow very carefully. So again, I'm structured on a learning community. I want you all to work together and really assist each other. In my opinion, if we all excel and we all get A's, that's awesome. Then everybody was fantastic. So there's no competition here. However, we do need to be careful about the type of assistance you are giving and receiving to make sure that you are actually learning the information. Okay, so while you're working with others, obviously you can ask or answer questions about the parameters or the guidelines for the particular problems. If I shared feedback with you, let's say you reached out to me for a question and I was able to give you some detailed feedback that really helps, and somebody else is having the same problem, obviously feel free to share that feedback with them, help them out. You'll be grateful when somebody can do that for you. You can discuss difficulties you experienced and how you figured them out and addressed them. You can also ask about what steps you should follow, or share notes from the lectures, or like for example, if you come and meet with me in the office hours. However, do not request or provide specific directions for completing any part of a homework problem. Now that sounds kind of a little confusing sometimes when we're looking about the option to ask or share steps that should be followed. So let's take a quick segue over and let's look at some example assistance. So here's two different types of assistance you could be providing for somebody. Which one of these is going to be okay? First, explaining how to calculate the standard deviation. Second, telling someone to enter 5 as a standard deviation for their homework problem. Well, this first one up here is where you're helping someone understand standard deviation so they can calculate it on their own later on, and that's great. The second one, you're simply telling the person the answer, you're not helping them learn. You remember, we're building a learning community, so if the person's not learning, then it's not working. So the answer for this is no. Just giving people straight answers obviously is not helpful. but every once in a while I have somebody get slightly confused. So let's make sure that we're clarification from this example. If you're ever in doubt and not sure about the assistance it's acceptable to be giving or receiving, always feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to clarify it. Okay, our last learning with others is me. I'm your instructor. So I'm part of your learning community too. Always feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Monday through Friday, I respond to emails within 24 hours. Weekends, it may take a little bit longer depending upon if I'm out hiking or, if I'm in an area where I can receive the message or I'm otherwise engaged. So I've built in several structured ways for you to communicate to me throughout this course. So you've got your email from your math lab problems. You've also got email from the Canvas site. And lastly, you've got questions at the beginning and the end of the homeworks. Okay? So this last part, these questions at the beginning and the end of the homework, I ask you to help clarify for me what you're understanding after you've watched the narrated lectures and then again after you work through the homework problems. I pay very careful attention to your answers, and then I use them as a weekly check-in to where you're doing well and where you might be getting stuck. So do answer them seriously. I do pay attention to them. I don't just glaze through them and give you the points and move on. I'm actually checking with them. If you're doing fine and you're doing well, I probably won't reach out to you very much. However, I do pay attention. If you're starting to struggle, tell me where you're struggling. Or sometimes students will tell me, honestly, I get it. It was just a really stressful time for me and I wasn't able to do very well in the homework, but I understand it. Okay, that's fine as well. So provide me that kind of feedback also. All right, back to our learning strategies. Okay, so wrapping up. These are the optimal learning strategies for doing well in this course and really learning and understanding the statistics. This class is built around repeated exposure, where you're going to be working with the material again and again and again. You have experiential learning, where you're going to be working with the problems. We've got learning through failure, so I want you to focus on the fact that when you don't get something right, don't panic, don't stress out. That happens a lot. Everybody in this class hits their own personal wall. No matter how well it's going, at some point in time, the wall comes up and you don't get something. Okay, that's fine. We need to identify it and we need to work through it. And lastly, learning with others. Again, we're a learning community. We're all going to learn together. So, using these 4 optimal learning strategies should put you on the pathway to success for this class. Next up, we have looking at using your technology.